Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Catherine Castiglia-Canino. I am the Vice President and Chief New York State Counsel of Security Title. And we're going to start with the seminar. The purpose of the seminar is how to avoid claims by doing more extensive research rather than just relying upon the abstract. Why? Because the abstract is just a snapshot of the public records. It does not tell the entire story. Sometimes to get to the story, you have to play the role of detective. Your underwriting counsel, although they may seem annoying and paranoid, go deep into investigation of a file before giving an answer. This is for good reason. You can give your underwriting counsel the most complex, bizarre, seemingly novel fact pattern, and they will tell you, been there, done that, and see it again tomorrow. You may think we are geniuses, but we are really good searchers. My particular nickname around the office is Columbo. So you want to investigate. It's important because you can investigate everyone in the transaction. The abstract does not tell the whole story, and you get a feel for it when you're a reader. You have this spider sense. And the first rule of superpowers is you sense something is off with the file. It probably is. So don't ignore your instincts. Look around. Try to get the best picture of what you're insuring. You must look before the four corners of the title because examiners tend to give us a pretty narrow view. The public records tend to give us a pretty narrow view. So we want to look around a little. And investigation is always the key to all of this. I will tell a story later on, but in one investigation while I was reading a title, I had to change my tactics once I discovered different facts than were presented. Okay, so fraud and forgery are some of our largest and most frequent claims today. The title insurance agent must be smarter and dig deeper into their titles to avoid insuring properties out of bad actors. These bad actors could be sellers, fraudsters, attorneys, title companies, heirs, entity members, etc. With new methods of fraud and forgery, such as deepfakes and wire fraud, along with new technology, things are getting harder to detect. With deepfakes, the person you're e-notarizing may not actually be a human being. Remote notarization platforms are creating software to weed out person and voice overlays, but it's something you have to be careful about. Wire fraud, sending money to who you think is the payoff lender, but is not actually the payoff lender. So we're facing a lot of things. With all this technology, if you see the highlighted article here, it highlights the dangers of artificial intelligence such as this. And an engineer using ChatGPT created a phony passport that fooled online notary systems. Not even fooled human beings, but fooled the computers that are supposed to protect against us. It's very scary. So we have to be sharper than the criminals. So all of these things warrant more investigation. We also have issues with corporate authorities constantly fake, corporation schemes, LLCs conveying without all the members. Heirs and family members, always ugly. They're constantly litigating estates, evicting each other, trying to cut out the unwanted family. So the internet is a wonderful and magical place, and there are a lot of things we can investigate, right? The sky's the limit. These are the fun things you can investigate for our purposes. Litigation, bankruptcy, arrests of claims and fraud, death, heirship, family members or past addresses, attorney disciplinary actions, notary public credentials, corporate history, bank history, and maps. And yes, I do all this for a living. We will go through each one of these slides as we go along, each of these subjects. More fun things you can investigate. These are less used but more important to know topics that you can investigate, including the Hague Convention, building information systems, OFAC, real estate listing websites, statutes and cases, identity verification, and the use of artificial intelligence. So litigation, and for those of us who are out of state, these first two links are for New York State. Your underwriting counsel will have the links for your state if you don't know them already. But litigation is a big thing. We use our local court systems in order to check the statuses of foreclosures, money judgments, partition actions, lis pendens, etc. I use this first site every single day, several times a day. I look up everyone. Your underwriting counsel uses these sites to check the minutes, examine documents, look for appeals. And when you look up an action, it will list all of the documents. You'll have all the history, and then you can click on the documents, at least in New York, and you can see what's going on. Recently in New York, though, we discovered that not all examiners update the minutes of an action. This can be dangerous. I had an agent ask about a foreclosure file where the homeowner was still in the premises. After looking at the action in the abstract, I went online to see the most current status of it, and I found an appeal for a file that was closing the next day. And I said, well, we're not going anywhere. We have to adjourn the closing. They just filed an appeal. And they said, what? My consent didn't show that. Well, maybe either the examiner didn't update the minutes, or the appeal was filed right after the content. I mean, it was very recent, within a few hours, that I found a notice of appeal. So you really have to do your own due diligence, not wait for everyone to get back to you, because they may be a little behind. It's a big risk. I had a case also. I went down a rabbit hole, like you do, and I was reading a title, and I was curious to see how a man had died. There was a wrongful death action showing in the estate. When I looked at the exhibited death certificate, I went online, I looked at the litigation, I looked at the exhibited death certificate, and I said, okay, now I see it. And then I said, wait a minute, and I blinked, and I looked at my abstract, and I looked at the death certificate. And then I realized that the person in the death certificate was only 4 years old when they bought the property. So that made me think, okay, we're not dealing with the surviving spouse selling the property. We're dealing with son junior, same exact name, and they're taking out of his estate. Now, we don't know anything about son junior. We thought we were dealing with the surviving spouse, which would have been an easy thing. And now I had to approach reading my title a lot differently, because now I had to know the heirs of mom, the heirs of dad, the heirs of son. We had to verify all this information, because it is a thing where sometimes a junior tries to pass himself off as the father and sell the property. So it's just something that I stumbled across in my morbid curiosity, and it turns out that we had a lot more homework to do because they weren't presenting us with these facts. So that's why we look around, because we never know what we're going to find. This was just a quiet day, and I just decided to look around, and I found something I did not expect. And that's what happens. Also, if you're having a sinking feeling about a party, or they asking you to believe something they presented, you must look at the action to determine whether a file is truly ready to close. You cannot close a file with open litigation. That's just asking for a claim. Okay, the second link is the surrogates court. I use this one all the time too. You have to look beyond what the examiner gives you, because they give you a limited picture. If I have preliminary letters, someone hands me preliminary letters testamentary, I want to know why. Is someone missing? Is someone contesting the probate of the will? Why do we only have preliminary letters? And I will go in to the surrogates file and I will poke around, because the examiner just says it's there. There's a couple of things here. It's there. It's our job to go look for them. So we had a case in this in surrogates file where the property was in one county and the surrogates file was in another county. They gave us letters testamentary. We said, okay, the executor's selling. They're the one who signed the contract. And my first question was, well, where's the rest of the file? I want to see the file. I want to see the will to make sure there's no specific devices. Because in New York, at least, if an executor, if there's a specific devise in a will, an executor cannot sell the property. The specific devisees have to join the deed. So we went to the other county, we pulled the file, and lo and behold, the will left the property specifically to the 5 children. So we were dealing with an executor who had 0 power to sell and 5 children who had not joined the contract and needed to join the deed. So again, e-surrogate, web surrogate sites such as this are fantastic for poking around, making sure you have the right parties, You always cannot take things on their face. The last one is the PACER system. It is a subscription service, but is very reasonable. You can run bankruptcy searches for maybe 12 cents on that. You can look up documents. You will pay per document, but again, it's a very reasonable fee, probably not more than $1.20 or $1.80. And it's used mostly for bankruptcy, but it also can look up federal matters. Any federal courts would be on there, including federal judgments, or the rare federal foreclosure. You can find it all on this PACER system. It's worth it to get a subscription for this. If you don't, your underwriting counsel do have access to this. Having a little problem here. Okay, I'm sorry. So we are up to arrests of claims or claims of fraud. And with that, you can look around for this in newspaper articles, a basic web search, local courts. What I generally do is I'll put in John Doe arrested or John Doe fraud and see what comes up on those just by putting that into the web page. So you can look around for that just to see what the post is. They'll probably have an outrageous headline, but that's one of the things I do. It's a simple thing, something you may not have thought of, but you can just look around at the newspapers. And you have to remember that just because someone is not perpetrating a crime in your state doesn't mean that they're not wanted elsewhere. If you see this this headline down here, New Jersey title company owner pleads guilty in $4 million mortgage fraud scheme with forged Brooklyn documents. So you do have that problem that this is a multi-state world, and you can find this in other areas. So now two states are disturbed by these people, because now New Jersey and New York now knows to stay away from them. Death and heirship. This is a very, it's one of the most troublesome topics for closings and claims. There's almost always contention and fraud among the heirs. These sites are very good. Some of them are free, some of them are subscription. Your underwriting counsel does have access to a bunch of these. So if you need us, always call us. If you're taking an heirship deed or reviewing a surrogate's court file, always verify the heirs independently. There are several sites that you can use in order to help you determine. Ancestry.com has a sister site called newspapers.com, and you can find old obituaries. Ancestry.com is very helpful. Vince and I have gone back 100 years trying to put together a family tree because, you know, they decide to only put on a deed every 50 years through many generations. Genealogy Bank is very similar to it. Find a Grave is as morbid as it sounds. You can actually look at the gravestone and see what, when people died and who's buried next to whom. It also shows grave sites designations. So if husband is graveside A and wife is graveside B in plot 12, then you can pretty much assume that they died and they were married at the time of death, because who would want to be buried next to your ex for the duration of time? LocateAnswers.com is a very, very simple site. The most you can get out of that is a date of death and perhaps the location of death, but sometimes that's all you need. So it's something that you can use with that. MyHeritage is very similar to Ancestry. LexisNexis we have available at Security Title, and it will show whether you're dead or alive. Most times it will show you all your past addresses, potential relatives, how you voted in the last election, and what car you drive. We're not going to give you all that information, but we can verify addresses and whether someone is deceased or not. Funeral home listed on the death certificate. We had a claim with this. We had a person, Jason Smith, and he conveyed out title as sole heir at law and distributee of Leslie Smith. Leslie, he had death certificates for Leslie and his wife. He had affidavits. He had photo ID, all forged. Even the affidavit from the pastor, nice touch. So a couple months later, Leslie brings a lawsuit and says, I'm not dead. Not only am I not dead, I don't have a son. And then you start to examine the claim. I looked at the death certificates, and usually you can tell that it's a forgery. You know, the font's a little off, something's a little crooked. This one was a pretty good one. But I looked at the husbands and looked at the wives, and for some strange reason, the wife's was not forged. The husband's was forged because he was obviously alive. They had something really interesting about it is they had two different funeral homes listed. So usually, you know, husband and wife, they just use the same place over and over. It's probably down the block and they use the same funeral home. So I took the funeral home website. I went and I looked. I looked at hers, found her on the website of the funeral home. Looked at his, he wasn't on the website. So you don't think of that to use in a lot of funeral homes now. They have obituaries. Some, hopefully, if you're lucky, they go back a couple of years. Some of them don't have it at all. But if you can't find your person who is listed at this funeral home on his death certificate on that funeral home site, you may not have a dead person on your hands, and you will have to investigate further. If you can't find him, if you can't call up that funeral home and said, hey, did you have a wake for him last week? And they can't answer you, he's still alive. So it's a small detail that you may not know, but it's there. And it's a great source of information. Regular obituaries. I've had agents come to me and say, can we do a deed out of all the heirs, the 4 kids of Mary Smith? And I'll look online, I'll look for an obituary. And I said, why are there 5 names? Mary Smith has 5 children according to this obituary. And the good thing about obituaries is it's backup information, because the people who are writing these obituaries, you know, the people are grieving, they're not filtering, they're telling the funeral director, you know, this is our family, this is it, and the funeral director is posing it. They're not thinking, oh, I have to, you know, leave this person out so we can get his share. So we said, why are there 5 kids on the obituary, but you only have 4 kids signing the deed? Oh, well, he went on a 3-hour tour and he never came back, so he's presumed dead. We don't know where he is. Or mom, you know, mom disowned him on her deathbed, believe us. Not a thing. So the most likely scenario is he post-deceased. Okay, if he post-deceased, who are his heirs? We can't just say, oh, well, there's 4 left, we'll just take them. We have to know, are the 4 his heirs? Does he have a wife? Does he have children? So we have to investigate that more. So on that type of thing, I said, no way, Jose, go to court, you know, get an administration, because they're obviously trying to pull something on the black sheep of the family, and that's not what we need. That's an instant claim if he ever comes back. Also, obituaries. We had like I said, they're getting more clever. We had a case where 2, a brother and a sister, went to surrogate's court and got letters of administration for mom's estate. We're the only 2 heirs of mom. We're going to get letters of administration, and we're going to sell the property. And they did. The problem was they had 9 other siblings. And the 9 other siblings sued them and tried to set aside our transaction. I'm investigating the claim. I type in her name. It's an unusual name. I find an obituary in a Haitian newspaper in French. And my French is a little rusty, basically, because I've never taken French, but I could discern that there were 11 names listed as her children. They listed it in this French obituary. If we had taken that extra step prior to the closing, and who would think, we all rely on the surrogates court to do their due diligence, we wouldn't have had this claim, because we would have found this obituary, even though it's, you know, in the Caribbean, and we would have asked a lot more questions and not had this claim. So these types of claims are very tricky and practically undetectable, but there is a way to find it. You know, we are finding it when we're investigating the claim. Let's see if we can do it before the closing. And that's a lot of here. And Spokeo will also, it's kind of more of a people finder type of site, but it will tell you who your relatives are. So we have to make sure that we have all the heirs joining a closing deed. No one's trying to cut out anyone else, because the litigation always comes back to bite us, and they always try to set the deed aside. So we just have to watch, and these sites are very good in helping us. And like I said, even a general, pop it into Google, put the person's name in, something usually comes up. So that's what we do with those. Family members or past addresses can also be checked on these people sites. The bottom site is, the top site is whitepages.com, and the bottom site is My Life. And I put in John Smith. He's in New York. I have no idea where Lansing, New York is, but if I use these sites, if he says, oh, that judgment is not me, I've never lived in Spencer. Oh, yes, you have. They're also known as these names. Okay, these judgments may be yours. Or if I'm looking for heirs related to Sheila, Alex, Alexander, Daniel, and Daniel. A lot of doubles there. Sometimes we use it to obtain their contact information. Hey, are you selling that vacant land upstate for half its value? You call them up and see if that's the truth. Most likely, no. Someone is stealing that vacant land and trying to pass themselves off as John Smith. So you can get a lot of information from these people sites about family members, past addresses, contact information that you can use to find out if the people in front of you are telling the truth. Attorney disciplinary actions. Attorneys are not always the angels we make them out to be. Attorneys can be involved in fraud transactions just as easily, or be accused of stealing escrow money. You may want to look them up to see if they've faced any disciplinary action. Attorneys, though, tend to be in newspapers when they commit their crimes because they like to do it big. So you may want to check them too. So this is the New York State Unified Court System. I looked up this attorney, and there's his registration number, his name, and he's been disbarred. And if you click down below on this link, it will show him what he was disbarred for. Oh, he stole the last 3 down payments that he collected, and he went to Vegas. You know, whatever it is, it will show it. And if you have a feeling that an attorney is going to run off with the money, or is not going to do things, or is not trustworthy, look him up. See what's going on with him. See if he's actually, you know, he could have been suspended 10 years ago for fraud. I'm still going to put him on my hit list. I'm not going to let him anywhere near my closing or touching any type of mortgage payoff or any other types of funds. It's important to look him up too. Speaking of other parties involved in fraud, notary public credentials must always be checked when you have a situation where you may have a no consideration deed, you don't know if you have a good deed. You look up the notary public. We've had instances where the notary public information was taken and typed onto a deed. After verifying the notary information, we contacted the notary public. She indicated that she uses a stem, and by the way, that signature was not hers. So we knew we had a bad deed. Luckily, we knew the notary in question. We've also had instances where the notary public did not exist on the state rolls. An attorney's office presented a deed, because attorneys are not always angels, that turned out to be forged. I first looked at the person. I did a person search. Where's Jane Smith? And Jane Smith turns out to be an 80-year-old woman who lives above the attorney's office who prepared the forged deed. Then I went to the notary public site and I looked her up. Was she a notary? Nope. So fraud can come from anywhere, and that's just the main thrust of this. And this is why we look around. Notary public information can be easily faked. If it's pre-printed on a deed, it's probably fake, because who does that? So this is the New York State site. You can go to the open data and you can look up the notary public and see if they're an electronic notary, a regular notary, what their notary number is, when their notary expires. Because we've looked up a couple of notaries on forged deeds and the notary didn't even exist. They're not even trying to steal someone else's information. They're just making it up. So you want to look on the notary public credentials to make sure that you have the right person. Corporate history. Almost every state has a corporation database, which can tell you the status of corporation, data formation, officers, mergers, etc. The Secretary of State is charged with keeping the corporate records. The attached link is the search for New York. Your underwriting counsel will have that, or you can just look up the Department of State in your state. And you use this. New York is not always good with this, but for service of process, they'll usually have a name of the person who they would be processed, who could accept service of process for the corporation. If you have another person signing your deed and it's not that service of process person, you might want to question that and see if you have the right person with the right credentials in order to be able to sign that deed, or if someone's just hijacking this corporation and running away with the money from the property. You have to be careful with a lot of these, because even looking at LLCs, we had a claim, A and B LLC. B claims he's a sole member, sells the property. A comes back and tries to set aside the sale as A did not give membership authority. So you always have to be careful when there's two names and you're only being told that there's one member. So look at the corporate history. Sometimes it can give you a clue on things. And you can look it up to see if the corporation is still actually viable or if they've been dissolved for any reason. Okay, now we're up to bank history. These are several sites, paid and unpaid, that will assist you in tracking down a past defunct lender. This is most important when you have defunct banks. The sellers are trying to get a satisfaction, and they tell you it's impossible, we can't find them. And you go to me and you say, can we just pass this or hold an escrow? And I said, well, it's Capital One that took over for Bayside Federal Savings Bank. Go tell them to go to Capital One. This is what I use. FDIC and FIEC are both governmental sites. They're both probably the same search, but if you put in, Bayside Federal Savings Bank and you click on, defunct taken over by, fleet defunct taken over by, etc., you end up at Capital One, and then you can go and tell them, go to Capital One, get your satisfaction. This is the successor per the federal records. State banking departments, again, this is a New York State site. It's very old-fashioned. It goes back to the 1800s, and it'll give you the bank name and then every single permutation underneath it until you get to the final, the final most modern lender owner of this bank. Payoff assist. Payoff assist is primarily for knowing who to get the payoff letter from, but it also can help stating who you can obtain a satisfaction from. I believe we have payoff assist with security title, so if you need it, call your underwriting counsel and we can help you with that. And MERS, the MERS Servicer ID site, use the min listed on the open mortgage to discover who the last loan servicer is. because what MERS will do is say, okay, Wells Fargo is the last person to service this loan, and the min has been discontinued, so you know it's the last one. Go to Wells Fargo and get your satisfaction. And your local county clerk site. You conduct a name search and see who's been issuing satisfactions since this bank went defunct. This is what I did. I was trying to find Fremont Investment and Loan. I needed a satisfaction. I put them in. I traveled down this path, and I ended up with ELA Holdings. As late as 2019 was issuing satisfactions of mortgage. ELA is still around. They don't answer my calls, but you could see that they are the ones that took over from Fremont Investment and Loan after they were reorganized, after Signature took them over, after Real Industry took them over, and now it's in ELA. So I just did this by a simple New York City ACRA site because New York City has the best systems in the world. Did a name search, who's signing satisfactions for them in the modern day. And that's how I got that. Maps, any map. Bing Maps, Google Maps, your local tax map, old insurance maps, file maps. They can assist in determining certain items in your abstract, old boundary lines, old street lines, possible out of possessions can be seen on some of these maps. Like in the subject picture, you're probably looking at a survey that says a wall separates these two properties. You say, oh no, a wall, we're cut off from our property. And then you look and this is the wall. You know, so this can be shown on a, you know, street view of Google Maps. You can see a little more information. You can see where the boundary lines are. You can go back to several, if you go again to the New York City map system, you can go 5, 6 maps back and you can see that 38 and 37 got combined. They have new dimensions and then they put a condominium on it. You know, these old tax maps will be marked up, and then you'll see this is from 1983, 1984. This became a condominium, and you can go backwards in time and see how these things changed. How did the dimensions change? Are they correct changes? Do you have the right property after a subdivision? We've had more than one case where I bought this property, but they deeded me the property next door. So maps of any kind are always helpful. Overview maps can tell possibly what's behind a fence or, you know, what a boundary line is. So use all these programs. Any random, you know, map thing. You can see how a curb runs or whether you're in the middle of a street just by looking at a big map. So it's very helpful. Again, we're getting into the obscure a little. This is the Hague Convention. Countries joined the Hague Convention partially to make the process of document authentication easier. Instead of having to go to local U.S. consulate, a party can merely use a local notary and then have the document authenticated by apostille. An apostille basically is a certificate of authentication by the Hague country that is attached to the document. Not all countries are party to the Hague Convention for this purpose, therefore verification of the country is necessary. This is done prior to the execution of documents. If seller's attorney presents the documents will be executed in another country, you can say, yes, the country is party to the Hague Convention and we will accept a document locally notarized with apostille attached, or no, the party must go to the U.S. consulate for notarization. And at the bottom here is a link to a list of the Hague Convention countries. Building information systems. This is the New York City website. Again, it's fantastic. Some municipalities have these building information systems that will give you a building snapshot of the premises, certificate of occupancy, vacate orders, building classifications, etc. Sometimes you have a case where it's assessed as a 3-family, but the certificate of occupancy says a 4-family. You want to go to the building information system and see what it actually is so you don't charge the wrong transfer tax. It can also show if there's a vacate order on the property or splash it across the screen, that means there may be hundreds of thousands of dollars in relocation liens that we're going to accept in our policy because we don't want any part of. We don't want a lien coming back and put against the property that we didn't know about because we didn't know there was a vacate order on the property. So it's very helpful. It gives a snapshot of the physical property and buildings of it, which we don't really get into, but it is a handy system. OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control. This is where you run your Patriot searches to make sure there's no government sanctions against your parties. You cannot insure a member of on the OFAC list. You know, these are terrorist organizations, etc., and they don't want the money laundered. So you run your Patriot searches, and if you get a hit, you can't tell anyone. You have to go to this site. You can look up the name, and OFAC has a whole laundry list of items, a procedure for making sure that you don't have a direct hit. If the name is Muhammad Ali and there's 1,000 Muhammad Alis or 100,000, you're going to have to go through the step-by-step system to see if your Muhammad Ali is the person in the Patriot search. And if so, you have to shut it down. Most likely, they don't. They're not conducting business this way. Real estate listing websites. Again, more of an obscure thing, maybe something you don't think of, but Zillow, Redfin, Realtor, they're all providing additional information about the premises. Maybe you have a refinance and your examiner didn't turn out the planned unit development homeowners association documentation. You said, wait a minute, I know this area. This is the Bristol or whatever. This is a PUD. And you go on Zillow and it says homeowners association dues $400 a month. Okay, yes. Okay, now I have to raise something. This is something that I have to go yell at my examiner about. There's also additional photos available to obtain different angles of property lines. Bing Maps, Google Maps, they don't always show. Sometimes they only show the overhead and you really can't see the bottom. So what you can do is you can go to the listing. And you can flip through and say, oh, that's a very nice bathroom, but I want to look at the back fence. And when they show the backyard, you can say, oh, wow, that fence is, closer to the line than we thought, or there's a gate in that fence. Okay, that out of possession isn't really a thing. So it gives you a better angle of the pictures. Also, it gives you an estimated value of the property in question, and that can help prevent fraud. If a house in Brooklyn is being sold for $300,000 and Zillow is saying it's $1.2 million, even though they're inflated, you're going to question that. You're going to make sure that this isn't some sort of get-rich-quick scheme, some fraud, something that's going on here that, you don't want to deal with because it does not seem legitimate. That's another thing with the pictures. If you're selling on $1.2 million for $300,000, are the pictures showing a burned out building? Has it been burned to the ground? Okay, maybe now it is worth $300,000, but it's something you have to kind of look at and see. Also,
Catherine,
yes.
You're doing great. I just want to keep a reminder that we're getting close to the 50-minute mark, so we probably just want to maybe pick it up a little bit at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vince. So there's another issue with the real estate listings. If your property is not listed, that could be a red flag. This could be a foreclosure rescue program. It could be a deed theft scheme. It could be something that's not kosher. So if you do not see a listing, the absence of it is also a thing. All right, I'm going to go a little quicker. Statutes and cases are not just for lawyers. Sometimes sellers' attorneys need convincing that our underwriting principles are steeped in state or local or federal statute. These are some sites: FindLaw, Justia, LexisNexis, state sites. Justia is my favorite, I have to say, because they do past, they'll do 20 years of different versions of the law. So you have the most updated law, but if you need to know what a power of attorney looks like in 2006, you're going to go to 2006 law and see what the power of attorney looks like. Identity verification websites such as Verified, even just a web search of what an out-of-state license looks like can be helpful. If you don't know what a Colorado license looks like, you can look online and see what it looks like. And there are services that use multi-factor authentication to verify your parties as closing such as verified. This is my last slide. Good. Artificial intelligence, the buzzword of the decade. The title insurance industry is finding more and more uses for AI in our everyday practice. ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini are all sites that can be used to gather information from other sites, analyze them, and give you an answer to your query. But artificial intelligence is only as good as the data you enter and the specificity of the question you ask. If you don't ask your question correctly, it's not going to work. It's going to spit you out something that you do not want and may be wrong, and then you try to rely on that. AI should never be used blindly. You always have to check the sources. They'll always tell you what sources they use in order to get that information. And you can look at something like I have here and then click on the source and say, wait a minute, I don't live in Minnesota. So you have to really check where they're grabbing their information from. An attorney had AI write a brief for court for him. The cases cited were not only not from his jurisdiction, they didn't exist. I think he's working at 7-Eleven now. But remember, you know, he didn't fact check these things, and AI, it's this new tool for public consumption that's only a few years old. It's imperfect. It's a guide at best. And if he didn't check his sources, and AI might just make them up like they did here, and you can get into a lot of trouble. He is not working in 7-Eleven, but he was censured by the court. But you can see here that I asked, can an executor in New York convey property if there's a specific device in a will? It gave us the property authority in New York, EPTL 11-1.1. So this one is correct, but not everything is. And don't forget, AI cannot replace your favorite underwriting counsel. Always check with your counsel before relying upon AI, because like I said, it could be misleading. It could be for other states. It could just be made up. So we will go to our last two poll questions, and then we'll take any questions you may have with the material.
Okay, it's a pretty simple one. You attest that you are the registrant for this course and completed 100% of this course without assistance. Need to launch it. Here we go. Make sure everyone is trying to get credit. Click yes.
We're up to 82%.
Yep. Make sure
If there are any questions while we're doing this, please put them in the question box.
Yep. Questions in the question box. Give us another 10 seconds or so. Move on to the next question.
We're up to 92%.
Yep. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, one last poll question. I am or am employed by an agent of the Security Title Guarantee Corporation of Baltimore.
Catherine, while everyone's voting, I was actually, as you were talking, I was just wondering, are there any times that you think it's is it that you find it preferable to run a search as like an AI, like a Google AI search versus a Google, just a regular search? Like when do you most find that it's useful to use AI as a search tool?
Well, I'll use Google searches more for people. I'll use Google AI searches for more concepts. Like the one I showed on my screen, can an executor sell property when there's a specific devise in a will? You know, I'm looking for the statute or the case law. I'm going to use AI because it'll more likely say yes or no, and here's the information, and then I can just track down the information from there. It's kind of like a quick guide for researching statutes and cases, or even just a concept. You know, can a deed go into a trustee, not a trust? You know, what's the rule in New York? So I'll use it more for that type of thing. But I'll use Google and Bing for people searches.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Catherine, I have a couple questions. The first one is maybe procedural. It says how to return the affirmation of completion. I think that's a Vince question.
How are we doing that email?
Vince, are you there? If you're,
I'm sorry. Was there a question for me? I'm sorry. I didn't hear.
I think so. There's a question that says how to return the affirmation of completion.
You can do it by email to either Andrew or myself, vdancy@esecuritytitle.com, or just reply to the email that you got from Linda, which would have included it in it.
Yeah, Vince's email is also on the screen right now.
Okay. The first question says, hi, Catherine. As of the last time I asked, Security Title does not maintain a list of flagged parties and properties that appear in its bulletins, which can be queried when accepting a new order. We have been keeping a spreadsheet, but this leaves a lot of room for user error, and we are leery of falling into the trap of getting involved with something on the bad list. Are there plans for a searchable database? Thank you.
Rachel, in New York, we actually do have a searchable PDF online. I think it's under state specific, under our services in eSecurity Connect. So if you go there, we keep an updated list of all our bad actors, and you can go on there. It's a PDF, but you can hit find, and you can search your parties to see if it's there. So yes, we do have one for New York. I believe we're working on it for the other states. So we do have that because it's very important. Like you said, there's a lot of room for error. So that's why we just decided to consolidate it all, especially, you know, if you're a new agent and you don't know what happened in 2012 and who got put on the list. So we made that decision sometime last year. Also, just something to point out is when these underwriting alerts that you see, a lot of them are, you know, tips from agents. Agents did their own research online, or they asked a lot of questions and they said, I don't trust this person. Something's going on, or I heard this in the neighborhood. Bring it to us. We'll investigate it and we'll put out an alert. Sometimes you'll see, you'll call us, the alert's out the next day or the same day. So we rely on you as much as we rely on searching for our information.
Okay.
I think I saw another question, Drew.
Yep. Seller says that Mama died and she's sole heir, but she says Mom had a will also naming her as sole beneficiary that has now been lost and was never probated. What do we do to address the lost will issue?
There's not much you can do. You can call, you can do your searches online, see if Mama had an obituary, and if she is the sole heir. Usually if someone says that and all of a sudden they can't find the will, pretty much a red flag. But we would probably have her go to surrogate's court and go get an administrator to sell the property, just so at least they go through the procedure of the surrogate court. They do the steps. There's due diligence. If there's anyone to serve, they'll the court will make them take care of it, and we'll have a court order to rely on at the end. But yeah, these are very tricky. I would probably not take a sole heir at law deed from this person, because she says there is a will and it was never probated. Okay, find something. Even if you find a copy, just give us something to work with so we could, we can help you out. But, the most conservative thing is to have them go to court and get an administrator instead.
Great. So we don't have any more questions, but I don't know if you wanted to offer a short list of some of the most helpful tools or the best combination of user-friendly and helpful tools from your experience.
Most of them, like I said, I'm on litigation sites 6 times a day. I look up everyone. I'm completely paranoid. Surrogates files as well, because those are the only things that are going to show you the entire picture. You're not going to get your entire picture from an examiner. They're only there to abstract it, which means shorten, so those are the most, so those are the ones we have the most claims on. We have the most claims on corporations also, but heirs and heirship is just a disaster. So those are the best sites. Litigation all day long, because I had one where we looked up a notary. I looked up a notary and make sure they're a notary, and then I looked on the litigation site, put the notary's name in, and they came up on like 4 or 5 actions that showed that they were involved with some sort of deed fraud. Okay, I'm not trusting this notary ever again, even if they're found, blameless in the whole thing. They're in the middle of something, and if they're either too dumb or too smart to be in the middle of this transaction, I don't want to deal with them. They're going on the naughty list. So the court sites are fantastic. Ancestry is great. Those are the places you see the most claims. Those are the sites that are the most valuable.
Wonderful. Well, Catherine, thank you for all your work in preparing this presentation.
Thank you.
Vince, thanks for all your help too. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to Catherine or Vince. And again, the video recording will be sent out tomorrow. I uploaded to YouTube, so I'm able to do chapter timestamps. So look out for that, and hope everyone has an awesome rest of their day.
Thank you.